In this movie, we will look at how if statements can be used along with controls that are placed on a form. In this example, I have a group of 3 radio buttons that are representing 3 age groups under age 6, ages 6 through 15, and over age 15. I have a button which will display an appropriate message depending on the age group selected to display an emission charge for an event of some sort. I'll first run the program and then we'll take a look at the code. At runtime, I can click display message, and with the under age 6 selected, as you can see, I get the message no charge for children under 6 years old. If I then choose the third radio button over age 15, I get a different message, which in this case $10 for those over 15. And if I select the middle button, age 6 to 15, I get yet a third message box that displays as the $5 charge for this age group. So obviously what we have here are message boxes being displayed, but it's based on the radio button that's being selected by the user. I'll stop the program and then we'll take a look at the code. The code is placed associated with the display message button, so I'll open that up. And as you can see, we have an if structure, and we also have an else-if structure. The else-if allows us to say if the first condition is false, then evaluate a second condition. The important thing to recognize here that the controls that we're working with are radio buttons. Inherent to radio buttons is the fact that a group of radio buttons is that only one of those radio buttons can be selected at any given time. So therefore our if structure should reflect that. That is, if the first radio button is selected, perform a function of, in this case, displaying an appropriate message box. If the first if statement is false, then the else if evaluates the second if statement to see if it's in the second age group. If that's true, then an appropriate message is displayed. We have yet another else if that will now evaluate the third condition only if the first 2 if statements are deemed to be false. If the third condition is true, then the message box is going to be displayed appropriately. Notice in this structure there is only one end if statement. Unlike other examples that we've seen where we have nested if statements with each individual if structure, we had an end if. The key difference here is that the else ifs statements create in essence one very large if end if structure. Now, and the other thing I want to point out here with this if statement is the property that's being evaluated with the radio buttons. Radio buttons have a property called checked. That is, if the user selects that radio button, then it is the check property for that radio button is said to be true. You could also check to see if it's not checked by evaluating the property to false. So if the radio button was not selected, you could display a certain message or you could perform some other action. Likewise, checkboxes have a checked property. In this demonstration I'm using radio buttons, but I could just as easily use checkboxes. Keep in mind, however, that multiple checkboxes could indeed be selected. So therefore you may not want to use this if-else-if structure with a checkbox, since the possibility of multiple checkboxes being selected is true. In this case, only one of these 3 if radio buttons can be selected, so therefore this if-else-if structure is an appropriate one.